Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first breakout session of day 2, and it's lovely to see so many people here. I'm Jenny Shawley from Manchester Met. I'm chairing the session today, although in reality I don't really have very much to do because Liz Wainwright from Bristol is going to be presenting to us on use of AI, advanced data analysis techniques, continuous improvement, lots of other stuff around automation in how we actually do KE today. And it is an interactive session, so there will be some activities to do after Liz has gone through some of the work that she does. So she works at the University of Bristol as an industry partnerships manager for mathematics, and having had a look at what she's going to be talking about, it's really brilliant. So Liz, over to you.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Okay, good morning. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for coming to this session. So, as knowledge exchange professionals, we collaborate with organisations whose business is innovation. And we champion academic researchers who are at the forefront of scientific exploration, technological discovery, and thought leadership. So, it's clear that we should also echo that level of cutting edge in the professional support that we deliver. And the way that we can do that is by harnessing the best tools of the day. There are many technologies that are reshaping the way that knowledge is shared and it's used, it's disseminated. And I'm interested in how these technologies hold the potential to revolutionize the traditional role of the KE manager, and make our practices more dynamic, more engaging, and more effective. But most importantly, I'm really interested in how they can free up our time so we can do the most important part of our role, which is making those people connections. I think that by harnessing the use of new technology, knowledge exchange professionals can become the innovation leaders in their organizations. So my name's Liz Wainwright. I'm the Industry Partnerships Manager at the School of Mathematics currently. I've really enjoyed the last couple of days getting to network with a few different people because I'll actually be moving up to Edinburgh next month as the, thanks very much, as the Associate Director of Strategic Partnerships with Edinburgh Innovations. But currently my team supports academics and students in engaging and collaborating with industry and public sectors. Like all of you here, I manage huge amounts of work that's always ongoing. There are, many parallel projects going, all at different points in their progress. We manage new connections, we manage active research, we hold keep in touch meetings, we have visitors coming in to visit the department. We respond to inquiries, we connect academics with different organisations. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. And I know this is very familiar to you all. And keeping tabs on all of that is really, really tricky. But it is part of the role and it's part of the art form in itself. But really, realistically, at the core of what I do, what my role is really about is making those connections, working with people, and understanding how they want to make important, impactful research. So I'm always on the lookout for ways to free myself and my team of the stuff that keeps us sat at a desk and focused on the important stuff, working with people. Okay, so this session, we're kind of in two parts. The first part, I'll talk about IA, and the second part, I'll talk about AI. So with the first part, we're talking about intelligent automation. I will go through a very quick overview of what automation software is, what it can do for you, and I'll give you two really light-hearted examples of how you might be able to use it. This is absolutely not a training session or a walkthrough of how you would do that. This is just a taster of the kinds of power that automation software has and how it can free up your time to do other important things. And then in the second part, we'll be talking about AI. So I'll be focusing on generative AI. And in the second part, we'll have a practical exercise for you to be doing in groups in your tables. And then at the end, hopefully, we'll have a good amount of time to discuss feedback and your learning from the session. Okie doke. So whilst this is all about the tech and how to use cool, new, interesting techniques, I do want to preface the whole talk by saying that offline practices and the culture that you lead in your organizations and your teams are the most important. After all, you can't fix what's broken with more tech and different tools. So these two techniques in particular, continuous improvement and design thinking, I'm sure you're all very familiar with. These two techniques in particular are highly complementary to building AI into your day-to-day practice. So for instance, finding improvements that are incremental, repeatable, and inexpensive around the kind of continuous improvement techniques there. That's really essential if you're wanting to try and build automation into your workflow. But also the points around ideation in design thinking and making sure you include different voices in those ideation sessions and in at that testing stage as well. That's really, really important too. And so I think having in the back of our minds, okay, yes, we can deploy all this interesting tech, but actually we need to find a really great principled way of doing that as well. I also wanted to take you through give you an idea of where this idea came from to give this session. So last year I took a course with the University of Leeds on managing innovation. And one particularly interesting idea that piqued my interest here was from a couple of experts in the field of innovation management. And they say that true innovation should only happen by design. So they suggest that 10% of your time should be reserved for innovation, innovating whatever it is that you do, okay? So you can keep on top of your day-to-day, but in order to have true innovation, have innovative ideas, you really need to kind of be reserving some time in your week every week to make that happen. So in this workshop, I'd like to explore what could happen if we decided to emulate this model, and what would happen if you dedicated some time every week to try and innovate your practice. So what is innovation? Okay, so this talk is about innovating. What is innovation? Here's a definition from Wikipedia. Obviously, I just Googled it. A practical implementation of ideas resulting in improvements to goods or services. Okay, so when I talk about innovating our practices, I don't necessarily mean that you need to go out and, invent a generative chatbot or learn how to code market-ready software. Absolutely not, and I'm not about that. I'm about using tools that you can use really quite easily out of the box without a lot of startup and without a lot of training. And a few weeks ago, I ran a poll on LinkedIn to see how many colleagues across HE are already using automation and AI and things like this in their day-to-day practice. And I was going to recreate that poll today with a great Mentimeter, but it's absolutely not working. So I'm going to go back to the old-fashioned Mentimeter, which, I mean, obviously, if you're going to give a talk about tech, your tech is not going to work, right? So a show of hands from everybody in the room. For those who are already using automation to save time on routine work processes, yes, regularly. Who's that in the room? A show of hands. Okay, so there's like one or two in a table. Okay, cool. How about, yeah, but not, yeah, in our team perhaps, but I've not personally ever used it. Yeah, a few. Okay. A bit less than one a table. How about, I've heard of it, but I've never used it. Okay, cool. And then last but not least, I've never heard of it. I don't know what it is. Why are you here? Anybody in the room? Okay, good. Excellent. And this is kind of what my LinkedIn poll showed as well, is that a lot of people, there was kind of like a peak around yes regularly and a peak around no, not at all. But either it's a bit marmite, you're already using it and you're kind of into it, or you've not engaged with it yet. And just to say as well, so when I was talking to people about this presentation, about this workshop, there was a few different people from universities around the country that I'd spoken to, and they were very similar, saying that they were interested in using that type of stuff, but they haven't quite got up to speed with. They didn't quite feel comfortable with this yet, so they perhaps hadn't actually deployed it with their team, but maybe they'd played with a little bit of things, or for instance, they were using other applications like HubSpot, which had some kind of level of automation in it as well. So they'd perhaps dipped their toe, but there was nobody that was doing there was very few people who were doing like full workflows that were automated by any automation process. Okay, but that being said, there is certainly an appetite for it. So people are really interested in it. And just to show this recent course from that was run with the Association of HE Professionals by Robin Greaves. Robin ran this course, an introduction to AI for HE professionals. She spoke about Microsoft Power Automate. She talks about how to process mine, automated minute taking, how to use ChatGPT in your everyday, and that was really, really interesting. I didn't go to the course, but having spoken to her about it, it sounds really engaging. She has a few really interesting things to say about it as well. She says it's important to get comfortable with this tech now, because it'll only become more prevalent in the software that we use. Also, if you're feeling unsure, like, oh, I think everybody's way ahead of me and they already know about it and everybody's been talking about this for ages, she said, absolutely do not think that way, because really we're still very, very close to the starting line and you're not behind the curve at all. It's time to get on with it, but you're absolutely not behind the curve. And that all of these tools that she uses in her demonstrations, in her courses, are made with the user in mind and are really, really easy to use and have an excellent user interface. She made the very important point that most HE professionals are probably a whiz with an Excel spreadsheet, and that's extremely complicated in comparison to something, say, ChatGPT, which you can open and use almost immediately, right? Okay, so I popped her LinkedIn profile on the slides as well for everybody to follow. She posts some really great material, practical stuff. I find her a really useful person to follow. Right then, so let's take a look at some of the software available. As I said, I'm going to start with IA and move to AI. IA, intelligent automation. So these tools have been around for a long time. They're great for efficiency, but I would say that they're broadly quite underused. This particular slide is a slide from a talk that I gave in 2017. So I've been interested in how you can maximize your time and work smarter rather than harder for quite a while. And in this particular talk, I was demonstrating how our team was using if this then that triggers to help manage our team's shared inbox and our task list in Todoist. So basically what you see on this screen is a bunch of tools that the university were using at the time because they hadn't they hadn't moved to the Microsoft-only environment, and we had emails and information coming in all sorts of places and stored in all sorts of different places, Google, Dropbox, OneDrive. We were rationalizing that and all of the information coming in through our shared inbox, and then somebody was kind of like typing up to-do items into this to-do list software. But in the center there, you'll see a blue box, which is a screenshot of if this then that trigger, if this then that is an integration software which manages your automation trigger for you. And what that blue box shows is that this trigger eliminated anybody having to kind of copy and paste information from all sorts of different places. And that information would automatically flow from your Dropbox, your Google Drive, your shared inbox, whatever it was, and it would be pasted into the to-do list. Somebody would be allocated the task, and it would be allocated a deadline. And so automatically you had a team to-do list, which was always up to date and always had the correct information because it hadn't been copied and pasted by a human. You see that trigger is written in natural language, which it just means the way that you and I talk as human beings. And that trigger says, if a new email in our inbox is labeled action, then create a task in my Todoist inbox. And so that's exactly what it did behind the scenes. If somebody labeled an email with action, then that would automatically appear in a to-do list for my team. So really, really simple, really easy, but it eliminated any copy and pasting by an actual human. And so since then, there's been a proliferation of these types of software products that will automate basic tasks for you. So you've got the if, this, and that in the bottom left corner, which is the trigger service that I was using back in 2017 at the time. There's also Zapier and Make.com and Power Automate, and they all function in a really similar way. These integration services basically connect different applications, so they could connect your emails, and connect to your calendar. They could connect to your Spotify account if you needed, to your LinkedIn, and it makes it easier for them to share data and make changes with other applications. Okay, but to give you then to give you an overview exactly how this works, most automation follows this very, very basic formula. If this trigger happens, if this happens, then an action happens. Okay. So you could make it more complex, of course, but at the very basic, it goes, if an email arrives in a shared inbox, for instance, as I said, then you could add a row to an Excel table, or it could be time-based. If it's Monday at 9 a.m., then send an email to a Teams message. If there's something submitted in a form, then create a calendar event in an Outlook calendar. Something that's basic like that. So that's the basic formula. That's basically how these automation systems work. You could make it a lot more complicated than this. You could include some if-nots, for instance. So if it's not sunny, then remind me to take my umbrella to work, or something like this, right? Okay. And what can automation not do? So obviously, automation cannot do everything. Automation is, so certainly as I kind of touched on at the beginning of this workshop, don't automate a bad offline workflow. Make sure you fix those issues before you invest any time in it. The best types of workflows, oh, I see that you can't see anything. Oh, that's why, interesting, okay. I didn't know I had this function on my slides. The best types of processes to automate are those high volume, high frequency processes. So I'm thinking, for instance, of where some organizations have some kind of like funding call, like you might have a pump priming fund and you're calling for applications and you have people sending you application forms or PDF forms and things like this, rather than having a human kind of moving that information from the email, from the PDF, then you might have that information automatically moved into a spreadsheet or into a SharePoint list or what have we. So those kind of high volume, high frequency processes are really, really great for automation, but obviously the small and very simple processes are really handy too. Testing is key, so something always comes up during testing, and if you're deploying it to like an external audience, whether that's your internal client, your internal academic audience, or whether that's, certainly if that's an external audience outside of your university, then obviously testing before deploying is key, and make sure you're super comfortable that it works. Make sure you have people test it who don't know anything about it, because they'll come up with problems about that system that you don't notice. Really drawing on those design thinking and continuous improvement techniques. Know that it won't always work necessarily, especially when you're first kind of playing with this new stuff, and so have an alternative plan in case something goes wrong. And always keep a backup, because it's a real bummer if you ever lose any work. That's an awful situation to be in. Okay, so any questions so far? I've kind of given you a bit of an overview of what automation is and what you might generally use it for. Any comments or questions so far? Hi, Malcolm. How easy is it? Yeah, I mean, TBC, to be honest with you. So the question was, how easy is it for me to go and take all my stuff from Bristol to Edinburgh? So obviously, there's things that there's contractual things that will mean that I can't take some IP from Bristol to Edinburgh, right? But generally speaking, I think because of the way that with all of the organizations' applications being within the kind of Office 365 umbrella, it's fairly easy to make copies and make backups and downloads of that will be fairly easy to roll out in an organization then that also uses Microsoft 365. And I think because a lot of universities will use that environment, it's quite transferable what I do already. So hoping that works well.
How easy is it to go from Apple to Microsoft with the various things that you're talking about?
So I use a Mac. I don't use a Microsoft machine, right. A Windows machine, I should say. And it's all fairly straightforward, I think. One big difference in using automation, the Microsoft automation in Mac environment, is that you probably want to use the online stuff. And I don't think that you can use the desktop stuff quite as well. Whereas when you're using a Windows machine, you can use a lot of the desktop automation, which has benefits. I'm not going to go into desktop automation. I'm just going to talk about web automation today. But it's definitely something to look into if you're a Windows user. Oh no! I use a Mac as well. Don't worry. No, absolutely. I'm only going to talk about the web automation because that's what I always use, and I know that's easy across all devices. You know, I have colleagues who use Linux devices and things like this, and all sorts of jazzy whatnots in the School of Mathematics. So I always I try and keep whatever I use easy to roll out between Mac, Windows, whatever. Hi.
Hi. How big is the team that you rolled this out with, and how long did the training take? How easy was it to get everybody up to speed using the same team, same software access?
So the team size is a team of around about 10, and they aren't necessarily everybody within the department. So there's people who are matrix managed from outside the department as well, which can sometimes make things a bit more tricky. But actually, in this case, it was really good because it brought those people in to the work that we were doing a little bit closer. And there were some people who would engage with it and were really excited by it and wanted to see everything that was kind of going on behind the scenes and exactly how it worked. And there was other people who said, I'm glad that that's working so well. I'm just going to carry on doing my job, my part of my job, and know that there's a slight change to the process and the way that we do something, and that behind the scenes there are other things happening, and the behind the scenes things, the automation part of it, they were less engaged with. They could just carry on doing their job, and realistically, that was kind of fine by me because the time was being saved by that process being automated. They just had to change their human workflow a little bit to change how they interacted with that. They didn't necessarily need to know what was going on behind it. But for those who are really engaged, it was really exciting. Hi.
Did you have to involve IT, and did they provide any blockers?
Oh, yes. Right. Okay. No. And so no. I'm about to talk about Microsoft Power Automate. And the reason that I chose to use Microsoft Power Automate was because it's within that Office 365 environment. And so there was very little that IT didn't need to know about it. They didn't need to push back on it. They didn't need to know about it. But equally, they weren't going to give any support to this. And that's something to be mindful of. So if you are feeling underconfident, if you're feeling unsure, then just make sure that you've drawn on as many resources as you can. I mean, there's so many online training, there's loads of YouTube channels of people giving loads and loads of great demos. So you can find this stuff out for yourself, but you do have to be fairly self-taught, as I am. And certainly this is not kind of my area of expertise, it's just a passion. And so it's something that I've self-taught, and it's something that I know full well that I wouldn't be able to draw on my IT services support for. Hello.
Thank you. Great session. In terms of, this is a new area for me, especially the team automation. So I'll be delighted if you could give an example of how you planned with a live example with your team. How did you manage to do that? And and what changes it brought for your team as well in terms of efficiency.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like you're a plant in the audience. You know what my next slides are. Okay, so I'll answer that question over the course of the next few slides. Okay, just to say, yeah, we're going to look at Microsoft Power Automate. As I say, most universities are using the Microsoft 365 environment, so this should be super easy for you. It integrates really nicely with all the Office 365 apps, and also you're able to share your workflow, so other people are able to edit your automated workflows or help manage those. It's free too, so that's a good thing. Some of those other services that I showed before might have free at first or a limited type of access, but you won't be able to get quite as much out of it. Okay, so that's the hyperlink, and so that's how you'd access Microsoft Power Automate. Right, I said earlier that there's no code. I'm not expecting anybody to be able to code any type of anything. And there are lots and lots of different templates. So you can just jump in and browse these different templates and find something that piques your interest. I'm going to give you two very routine examples using two apps that are hopefully familiar to everybody here, Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Planner. Planner is the Microsoft's kind of very light project management tool. It kind of looks like a Kanban board if anybody's used those. Our team uses Planner a lot to manage our work and our long-term projects, and we categorize our Planner tasks so we can also use the Planner as an agenda when we have a catch-up as a team or when we're updating the academic teams and things like this. So when I go into templates, I'm going to look for something that uses Planner because that's something that I know that we use a lot of the time. And we have this, I don't know if you guys can see this awfully clearly on the thing here, but it says, so a template to notify a team when Planner tasks have changed status. So this first example will send a Teams message to my whole team saying, this Microsoft Planner task has just changed. Somebody's ticked it off, they've changed a deadline, something like this. Okay. So what happens when, okay, I'm going to run through a little demo with you of what happens then when you go to deploy this template. So we click on the template that we want. If you could pause there for a sec, we can see that there's three different apps that this involves. So you'll need to allow some permissions to those three different apps. Okay, we can go ahead and play again. I click continue. I'm looking for which planner I want to use, and I'm looking for which group and then which planner, and then I'm having a little look for the team. Hang on, what happened there? Sorry, could you play that again? There we go. Okay, so we simply click the template we want to use. We allow all of these permissions. We select the group that has the plan. We select the plan itself. There's only one within that group, that's easy. Click the team that you want to notify. And then the channel. So you could have a specific channel so that your whole teams isn't, and then you click create. And what we see there is immediately that flow has been deployed, right? Very nice. Very easy. That's my first automation done. So that now I can have a channel within my team, within my Microsoft Teams, that has an update to the rest of my team to say, hey, this deadline's changed, or hey, I've added a comment to this particular task, or this task has been completed now. So for those within my team, for instance, we have a lot of people who work different days. Not everybody with hybrid working, not everybody's in at the same time and things like this. So it really just keeps everybody looped in and everybody knows what's going on. Okay, so looking at another template then, we see this one here, which is create a planner task when a channel post starts with to do in capital letters, right? So it's kind of doing a similar thing from the other direction now. What I'm thinking to myself, okay, but if we're all having a chat in Teams and somebody says, oh, we've got to get this done before the conference next week, then whilst you're in that same screen, you can type to do, add in the name of the task that you want to do, and without having to leave the chat itself, you'll have that task automatically populated into your planner. And you kind of see like, okay, that's a really, really small automation. Well, for me, the startup time of opening a new tab, forgetting why I opened the new tab, accidentally looking at my emails, then going back to the planner, remembering exactly what it was that I was going to put in, actually, it can really, really help workflow, and it just makes things flow a little bit better. So, I mean, we'll have a look at this, how to deploy this one as well, and it's pretty much exactly the same. If you want to hit play again. So what we're doing there is, again, clicking the template itself. We'll give permission to these apps. We find the plan that we want to update. We find the channel that the trigger is going to be made from, so that the task that I'm going to type out. And hit create, and that's basically our workflow done. Okay, and then when we go to, if you could click play on this one. Oh, sorry. This. Sorry, can you say that again? It would depend on the syntax that you put in there. So it would depend on if you put a space in there. But for my trigger there, I've just put to do as one word in capital letters. So that would be the only trigger that it recognised in that channel. Yeah. Okay, so if you could click play on this one, please. Okay, and then you see that when I go to my Teams channel there, and you'll see that I type out the word to do, and I put the task, I hit post, and automatically you get a little confirmation there that says, hey, you've created a new task. You can click it, it'll take you straight into that new task. You can amend that task a little bit. You know, you can add in a progress. You can add in, and you can assign somebody to it. But these are also things that you could tweak in your workflow and add that little layer of complexity into if you wanted to as well. Okay, but if templates aren't your thing and you know kind of what you want to do, but you haven't found the template for it, then the really cool thing about using Power Automate is that you can use an automate by create an automate with natural language. As I say, natural language is just how we speak as humans. And so I've got an example of myself here, if you want to hit play on that, where I'm just typing into this box, right? I know what I want to do, but I haven't seen a thing for it, a template for it. I want to copy my contacts to a spreadsheet every month, okay? So I write that out in natural language, I hit OK, and it gives me this suggestion. Okay, there's a trigger, the recurrence is time recurrence, and then the action from that, it will get my contacts and add a row to a table. It gives me some suggestions about other flows as well, so if that's not what you're looking for, you could have a look at a different type of flow. But I'm okay with the first one that's suggested, so I click next. I allow the permissions to my contacts and to the Excel form. And I create that flow. And you'll see here like kind of the under the hood part. And I found the table, I found the contacts area, I found the table and things like this. It's all fairly easy. As I say, nobody's coding anything. You're just finding the files and the library that you want to save all this information to. And it naturally it all kind of falls in place. Yeah, try and find from my many. See, this is one of the problems I'm going to have moving to Edinburgh. Many files and folders. I found the right worksheet that I want to save it to, and it all works quite nicely from there. The other nice thing about the Copilot being part, so you'll see in the right-hand navigation there's a header with Copilot. So this is the automation software that sits within the Office 365 apps. And if you did have a problem with your workflow here, as I say, this is the kind of behind-the-scenes part, which is showing you each of the triggers and how it's all working. You can ask the Copilot on the right-hand side, like, what's the problem with this part of it? Or how do I move it from doing monthly to every 2 weeks or something like this, okay? So you can test it, everything's working nicely, and then that's just a case of saving it and waiting for your contacts to be downloaded every month. Okay, cool. So one example from the University of Bristol that I wanted to talk through was one of my colleagues, Josh Brown, from the Continuous Improvement team, had used this type of automation workflow with the non-staff expense claim forms. It's not particularly close to what any of us do here, but I'm sure that there's similar kinds of things, as I say, where if you're calling for applications for something like this, where you're dealing with literally hundreds of PDF forms. And when he'd started on this particular project, it was basically a digital version of a paper process. People were emailing a PDF form, and a human would open that email, look at the form, copy all the information from that form into a different place, into a different piece of software, and do a whole bunch of other things, share it with people, put it into a spreadsheet, things like this, have to press approve and things. That equated to something like 0.75 of an FTE of a post, just somebody sitting there opening emails every day and looking at different PDFs. And he'd completely automated this particular workflow with Power Automate. So this is the kind of impact that you can have. And then just to go through a few of the details around that one is that, so that was with the accounts payable team, and it was a really, a very significant amount of admin time that was taken to process these forms. It wasn't particularly interesting work. It's quite dull for that person as well. The challenges there were that the PDFs were quite fiddly to extract the data from, and so that could be quite tricky to do. So it's really impressive that he could use that workflow to extract data from the PDF form as well. Okay, cool. So what have we talked about so far with automation? Offline behaviors and culture, I would say, is the most important foundation to have. Certainly remember that you are not behind the curve, and that whilst this is all very exciting stuff, I don't think that anybody is, certainly in my conversations with people in HE sector, is that nobody's really using this to its fullest power. It's being wholly underutilized, especially in HE, so certainly you're not behind the curve, but it's time to get on it. It's good to get comfortable with that tech right now. There's no need to learn code or programming, and it's best to start with small changes, as I say. If it's something like get my team site to update a planner or vice versa, starting with those smaller automations will make you really comfortable and your team really comfortable with this type of tech, and you can have a little play with it. In our team, we have a whole SharePoint site, which is just for testing and deploying interesting new stuff that we found, so that we know it's going out there with absolutely no risk. Really, there's no work that we're going to lose from it. As I say, experiment with templates that work well for you and your team, and testing that safe space. There are loads and loads of courses and self-directed material as well. Okay, so that was basically the automation part. As I say, I was going to start off with the automation part of my talk, and then we're going to move into the AI part of my talk. So we've all heard, of course, of generative AI. What is generative AI? It's the type of AI that generates things. AI is the science of making machines smarter. So intelligence is problem solving, and computers, generally speaking, can be much better than humans at this. The beginnings of AI saw logic systems, so for instance, computers being able to beat humans at chess. But more recently, the transformational change in machine learning has meant that machines can teach themselves things that we haven't necessarily already taught them. So rather than just having a vast database at which it can inquire at huge speeds, it's actually teaching itself things and understanding things that we haven't informed it about. And this is much closer to thinking than we've ever been before. And it means that they can generate their own content or ideas and make their own decisions. So here are some of the most famous generative AI software. ChatGPT is probably one of the easiest platforms to use, and it's very well known. So we're going to start with ChatGPT. What can we use ChatGPT for? Okay. So you could potentially use ChatGPT for all sorts of different things. You could prepare yourself for a meeting with a new client, for instance. That's part of a practical that we're going to be doing this morning. You could understand an area of research that's particularly dense you don't have any idea about, and one of your colleagues have come to you and said, hey, what about health devices? And you've actually never worked at anything to do with health devices before. You could start really doing some research and asking questions of ChatGPT to understand that area of research a little bit better. You could check your understanding of things that you already know a bit better as well. You could also use ChatGPT to help write the learning outcomes for a conference workshop, which is exactly what I did when I realised that there was another section to the form that I had to write. Okay, what you shouldn't use it for, though, is confidential material. This could cause a data breach and is very serious, so do not put any of your organisational or personal data info into ChatGPT or anything like that. Do not use it for legal advice, because that would be a bad idea as well. It offers general insights into things. And don't use it to totally replace your own human research, because these types of software are trained on old data sets, so it might not have the most up-to-date information. How you use ChatGPT, it's really simple. It's as simple as opening up a tab on your browser and starting to type. So when you open up a tab on your browser and you write in ChatGPT, this is what you look at. Hi, how can I help you today? It's very, very easy to use. It's very user-friendly. And yeah, there's no kind of training startup time, I would say. This is a nice cheat sheet from Robin Greaves. I mentioned her earlier. She's the person who ran the training course with the HE professionals. She posts things like this on her LinkedIn, and this is a really great cheat sheet on how to use it. So prompt engineering, for instance, what are the best questions you can ask for the most useful responses? How to teach ChatGPT to speak in your voice rather than getting this really weird kind of somewhere between, as Robin said, somewhere between a robot and King Charles. Have ChatGPT speak in your voice or your organizational voice. You could use it as role play, as I say. If you're going for an interview, you could give it the job description for the job you're going for and ask it to ask you questions about the role. And all sorts of different things. So she gives really great pieces of content like this on her LinkedIn channel, and I find that super useful. An example from the University of Bristol, one of my colleagues, Shelby, is a key partnerships manager, and he's working on a really, really lengthy legal document, a collaboration agreement. It's a 75-page document, and it's full of really inaccessible language. So his job is to read it. He needs to make sure he understands everything, and everything that's in there is really appropriate. But what he doesn't want to spend time doing is to summarize that document and make sure that all of the academic team that are working on the project understand it as well. So he, after having taken all of the confidential material out of it, he used ChatGPT to help summarize that and how to explain that in a different tone, in a language that was accessible to the team that he wanted to summarize this document for. And then, okay, so I wanted to run you through a quick example from my work. Right, so before you read this very text-heavy slide, this is from when I was, so for instance, I've got somebody coming into the department, somebody from an external organisation. They're interested in meeting with a few different academics. One of them is a professor in information theory. And I want to send the organisation, the external organisation, some information on the professor beforehand and what his work's about. So I go onto his website and I copy this paragraph at the top and ask ChatGPT to summarise it, because I don't know about you, but anything that says something like this has involved proofs of the Shep-Olkin concavity and monotonicity conjectures is difficult to understand. So I asked ChatGPT to reword it for a non-mathematical audience, and this is what I get. It says, this includes looking at how information is moved around. Oh, okay, suddenly I understand it. But you can see, because I've copied and pasted that text at the top from his website, the ChatGPT response is all in first person. So I then say to ChatGPT, okay, cool, but I don't want this in first person. So it then gives me a new summary, not in first person. This research applies to information theory to investigate limit theorems, probability, and statistics. Okay, cool. That sounds a little bit better, but it's perhaps one thing that the person that's going to visit me is going to say, well, okay, that's very interesting, the theory. Recent work's involved examining how information is transferred. Does that have an application in the that's of interest to the organisation that's coming in? So then I ask, explain the applications of information theory so it could be understood by anyone in one paragraph. And it gives me this nice summary. But it starts out a little like, the information theory is like a language of communication between systems. And so I ask it, please make this more formal, because it sounds a little bit airy. And it rewrites it in a slightly different tone. So you can see how these prompts are, making this information more accessible for me, accessible for my audience. I can ask it to rewrite. And so it's really, that would have taken me probably to write about what another person's work is about, would have taken me a much longer amount of time to understand and kind of condense that work myself, and like kind of maybe do a little bit of extra parallel research on the side to think, what applications could information theory have in the organisation that I'm talking to? That would take me a lot longer than just simply asking some of those questions. Now, before I send that on, I probably want to check that with the academic, and I probably want to kind of like sense check it myself with a few other colleagues or what have we. But you can see how that's already taken up loads and loads of time. Okay, brilliant. So, on your tables, I've given everybody a piece of paper that has 3 pieces of information. It's given you a random university, a random research area, and it's given you an organisation. What I'd like you to do in your tables is to use ChatGPT to prepare yourself for a similar type of meeting. Imagine you're from that university, that you're going to have a meeting with that particular organisation, and they're interested in the research area that I've given you on your tables. Use prompts, or as I say, prompts, questions, what have we, to find out more about things like the research area itself and the applications in that industry area or sector. Who in that particular university is working in this area, why this research area is important to the organisation, and what key here is maybe you want to ask as well what those visitors might ask you. So being prepared to be able to answer questions about that research area and about the applications. You might also want to ask about things like multidisciplinary opportunities. Is the university already working in this space? Things like that. So just see I think for me, it's really interesting to see how far you can get with your research with using ChatGPT I don't think you'd necessarily in real life only use ChatGPT, but for the sake of this workshop. And then at least one person on your table will need a ChatGPT account. If that isn't the case, if you don't already have one, it's very easy to get one on your laptop, on your tablet, on your phone, and I've got some steps to follow. Is everybody happy to self-organize on the table? You all have a sheet of paper. On your sheet of paper as well, you have a QR code which links to the cheat sheet that I showed earlier, in case you wanted to have a refer to that. Is everybody happy to self-organize, or would anybody like some info on how to get a ChatGPT account? Of course.
Ask it to speak. Oh, sorry. If you often ask ChatGPT to speak more professionally, if you're saying, "Oh, do it more professional," or "Do it less, like more informal," does it learn that you're often asking that, and therefore next time you ask for a summary, it gives you automatically the more informal, if that's what you ask?
I'm not so sure, and I know that there's differences between a free and a paid for account. I'm not so sure if it is automatically then start always responding in your tone. I think you would have to potentially ask that within your prompt, I expect, but I'm not so sure about that. That's a good question. If anybody else knows the answer to that, let me know. Hey.
With the paid account, you can create a persona.
Right.
And then you can choose that. So, for example, you can, I mean, I've got not a very advanced understanding, but I think with the paid account, you can create various implementations of ChatGPT. So, for example, you can train one on your own writing, and if you ask that one to create something, it tries to mimic how you write.
Okay. So you've got 10 minutes to get as much information as you can about that university and those research areas, and then one person can feed back. Okay, sorry to stop everybody short. We haven't got a lot of time left in our session, so we're going to move to some feedback now. Hopefully, you'll have had a little bit of time to have a play with that and have a discussion on your table about the information you've been able to find. Is there any? I'd like to just call for feedback generally from any of the tables because we're short on some feedback time. So, would anybody like to offer feedback on what they'd experienced there and the kind of information they'd gotten?
Hi, yeah, I think it's given a really good structure, but it's very, very generic. So I think we hadn't got as far as to drilling down into anything that wouldn't have really come to our mind already. But it is a good starting point, and I think the structure is quite good in terms of planning for that sort of conversation. I think that's where we got to.
And what did you ask to get that structure? Can I ask?
So I think we asked 3 questions. So one was, oh yeah, thank you. Why would DeepMind want to work with the University of Manchester on AI and data science? And then you asked it the other way round. And then to try to start to get more specific, we said, what's the University of Manchester's USPs in AI and data science? That response is maybe a little bit disappointing because it's still quite generic. So great start, but I think we've got more work to do.
Okay, great, yeah. And this table?
I think, and everyone can kind of jump in, but I think we found it quite useful. And personally, I feel like I hadn't realised how specific your questions can be, and like how much thinking can go behind like their answer. So we did quite a lot of basically market research to some extent. So we asked ChatGPT. We had an organization called Congenica. So we asked, like, does Congenica work with Edinburgh? That the answer was apparently no. Obviously, we would do a little bit of more digging, I guess. But turns out that Congenica does work with with Glasgow. And so we asked them, like, what does it work with Glasgow on? And also then which of the areas of research interest that Edinburgh is famous for is Glasgow not famous for? So is there anything that Edinburgh has as a USP? Because obviously they work with Glasgow on like something related to cancer. If they already work with Glasgow on that, they might not want to work with us on that. So what can we offer that they can't offer? And it just like listed a whole bunch of institutes that we have. And it did say, like, this appears not to have an equivalent at Glasgow. We would want to double check that. But it's already quite an interesting kind of perspective, and it does a lot of the market research for us.
Yeah.
I think I did some search and I agree with the general information that you can, and some more specifics that what I've asked, because I was asking, has our university been working in this area and how we can help? And how you can help is very general, with all the collaborations, studentships, placements, and everything that all universities activity. But if I asked, what have we done within this area, it's come out to say that it's a center for precision medicines had done within this area. So it does have a mixture of informations. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So it was very useful, I think, in trying to get a first kind of draft of the people we'd be interested in. Just some observations. Clearly, it's based on publicly available historical information, and I've always found that to be a limitation. Even of doing this the old-fashioned way of looking through information that we have on our databases, it doesn't tell you what an academic wants to do next. And that's always going to be a bit of a challenge with this. But one thing that was really interesting was we asked for, so we had Exeter and climate change and environmental science. So we asked what researchers in Exeter are working in this area, and it gave us a list of 5 male professors. So we did ask them, could you provide a more diverse list? And then it produced a list with 4 female researchers of different career stages. So I thought that was interesting. How it only went for kind of professors in the first instance, but otherwise, I think it was a great way of getting a starting agenda together and a list of people to invite.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think this table behind as well, just quickly.
Yeah, so I suppose we kind of cheated and just punched in what you'd written up in your slide. And so the example we were given was University of Strathclyde, which I work at. And the information we got back is scarily quite accurate and kind of worrying for my job a little bit at the moment. But I think, yeah, as a starting point, I mean, the names of the academics that were listed is accurate, and the service or the expertise that Strathclyde can provide is accurate. So as a starting point, but I think, yeah, you maybe need to go into a bit more detail and do a bit of your own research to supplement it. I've not really used ChatGPT much, but yeah, really impressed by it.
Yeah, I've also never used ChatGPT, but a few people at the table had. And it was interesting because I thought I should start small with small questions and then build on that. But it was suggested that we just punch in exactly what you'd written and start big, and then we could refine. And actually, it did really well just based off the big question as opposed to what I thought, which would be start small bits and build it all together.
Claire?
Sorry, just because I'm putting you there. Ava Luger, who's one of our AI ethics specialists, always opens up her talk with, here's what ChatGPT says about me, and it looks amazing. And then she says, but here's all the things it got wrong. So you do have to obviously check what it's saying. But as a starting point, it's really great.
And just to this table at the front as well, please.
It's really a summary of the whole session, particularly about using ChatGPT and things like that. I can see that a lot of what people do in this room is translate what a scientist does, what the academics are doing, to something that other people might understand, particularly when it comes to putting an application form together for a grant or something like that. I can see that there's some really useful applications here to translate what an academic might have provided you with something that someone like myself as a grant funder might prefer to read. One of our bugbears is always, it's too technical. We don't understand the language. So using this as a translation tool could be really useful and really powerful. And it'd be interesting to see in years to come how we take this technology and use it to our advantage to make, hopefully, your applications for grant funding more appropriate for the audience that they're going to be assessed by. So and understanding that is quite important too. So technical experts make it technical, non-technical soften it a bit.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's also all really great bits of feedback. I think what I'm hearing is that there is that very general response that you can get from ChatGPT. I think that the comments about what kind of prompts you put in is really, really important as well. Getting to the nub of the information that you need straight away. And of course, taking it with a big pinch of salt to make sure that what you're getting from it is actually appropriate, is actually correct. And there's the diversity piece as well. Certainly, it does make some assumptions, and there are definitely going to be biases in that system as well. I think that we're having to wrap this session up now, Jenny.
We are,
right?
yeah. Unfortunately, we're just right on time, which is great. But I think you can tell from the level of engagement. I think that was super useful, practical, interesting session, Liz. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, but also all the advice. I think we can probably all agree on that. It's been a great session. So thank you very much.
Thank you.